Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Today we're going to be talking about iterative development, which is an increasingly more popular technique in the workforce for how we release software and how we work on software. Um, Iterative development is highly connected to Agile and Scrum, um, and we're going to talk about what those are and how they are used. We're also going to talk about what Git is and how you can use that, and how you can use these skills together to really create development workflows and software development workflows that are iterative and work with software updates rather than software releasing as a whole. Now, to begin, we got to talk about what Scrum is. Um, by definition, if I can get the PowerPoint to advance. By definition, Scrum is an agile framework based on the idea of iterative development. And let's take a pause there. What is agile? And we really have to explore that in order to understand what Scrum is. So, what is agile? Well, agile, unlike waterfall, wait, what is waterfall? So, we're going to take one more step back from what is agile to what is waterfall? And waterfall is a name given to more typical and traditional software development life cycles, right? Um, each phase of the development lifecycle must be completed before the software moves on to the next phase in the cycle. Uh, in waterfall as a concept, there are 9 phases, and this is according to Wikipedia. And a quick aside, Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a plenty reliable source. Plenty of people look at it and work on it. It's not the same thing it was in 2013 where 2 people are the only people defending a page. Yes, anyone can make an edit, but just like with open source software, more eyes means more goodness. And sometimes some badness too. But the waterfall development lifecycle really has these 9 major stages here. Let me get out a laser pointer. That's preliminary analysis, the requirements definition, systems design, software development, integration and testing, acceptance and deployment, maintenance, evaluation, and then the disposal of the product. Because waterfall is based on this idea where software is developed, used, and then disposed of. You create Microsoft Office 2008, you release it, it gets used, 2009 rolls around, and you dump Office 2008. Of course, that's not really what happens with Office 2008. I believe we used Office 2004 until Office 2016, and in the meanwhile there was updates. But maybe back in Windows 98, right? You would only get your Office like once a year on a disk. The first phase, preliminary analysis, is where the developer or the developing company rather conducts a preliminary analysis. That's an analysis in advance before beginning development, right? This is part of the planning and research stage. They take a look at all the solutions, they estimate costs, benefits, identify what the objectives are of the customer, and they'll interview everyone that they can to try and get a best case look at what their a best case look at what the customer is looking for and what the public is looking for and what kind of costs will come and what other solutions maybe are being looked into, for example. And then they move on to systems analysis and requirements definition. And this is a way wordy title, but basically they take all of their data that they've researched and now they're going to kind of put it into documents that say, uh, this is the systems that we're going to need to analyze. These are the kind of requirements we're going to need to meet. Um, they're going to start to need to know sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. This is more about once we kind of know what the customers are looking for, what the potential end users are looking for. Now we need to know what the end users use, what kind of machines they use. Is it a Windows machine? How much power did they get? You know, that kind of thing. Whoops. And then they move on to system design. And now this is where they take it all together and they detail out what kind of design requirements are going to need to come into play. Pseudocode is written at the stage. What kind of deliverables are we going to be looking for? The diagrams, the all the fun stuff that you might even see in your classes still today. That they still do some kind of steps like this in some classes. Yeah. And then at that point they move on to coding. Once they're finished coding, they integrate the software in testing environments that replicate the end user products, and they check for errors, bugs, if it will work on all the systems that they think it should. Then, once they've acknowledged that it has, it will go into acceptance, installation, and deployment, and that is we're letting it out into the wild. From then on, they just take a look at the system, make tiny updates as needed, just kind of maintaining, make sure that the software stays up to date. And, ooh, excellent. I forgot to update the headers here. Give me 1 second. Very sorry about that. The next stage after that is evaluation. We take a look at what went right and what went wrong with this last software deliverable. And then we slowly take our software to disposal. And that's where we take the software down and we discontinue it. And we let everyone know that we're disposing of the software. We're not supporting it anymore. We're not releasing security updates for it anymore. And it's basically going into the dump, right? And then they'll go on to market the next product, get the analysis for it, and then create that. Now, waterfall does have some pros, right? The timelines are highly structured, right? By planning everything out in advance and creating all of this documentation, you get strict, highly scheduled structures, right? If you go into a project and you're like, the client needs the product in 4 weeks and they want exactly this, and these are the exact requirements, and that's exactly how it's gonna stay, everything feels great. When you're doing a computer science assignment and your teacher gives you all of the requirements right then and there and gives you a due date, software development, it seems easy. However, in the real world, this doesn't always tend to be the case, right? Waterfall is very strict and restrictive, and what happens if, say, during testing, you find out that there's a major bug, or maybe during testing, you find out that there's a brand new requirement, and that brand new requirement requires a lot of new development. Well, then you would need to do all the planning and development, and you would need to plan out some schedule for it. It becomes very difficult, and it's not a framework that really allows for that kind of flexibility. Waterfall relies on the fact that you know the requirements before development even begins, and that's know the requirements. You need to know all the requirements. So you can't really do iterative and incremental development using waterfall. But as I just showed here, the phases and framework are really easy to explain. Agile, on the other hand, is a methodology that solely focuses on incremental, iterative, and adaptive development life cycles. Whereas in waterfall, the focus is towards the documentation and how the software will survive on after development is complete. Agile focuses more about how people will interact. So the customer and the developers with each other. Agile is really about the quality of the software that you release. and adapting to the challenges as they arise. Waterfall is about meeting requirements. It doesn't matter if it's good so long as it meets the requirements that you were given. Because you can't just spin on your heels and change the requirements as you go along, because Waterfall doesn't support that kind of flexibility. The core values listed by the Agile Software Development Manifesto um, is individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. And that's not to say that the things on the right are bad. In fact, they explicitly state that those things on the right are still very important, but they want to put the things on the left over those things, that they're more important than those things, that the individuals and how to interact is more important, that the software works over just creating really good documentation, that the customer is really involved over just putting together a contract, right? Responding to change over following a plan. Sometimes plans don't go to plan. Agile encourages people to work together to create software first, and then everything else comes second. So, what are some core principles to Agile? Well, there's frankly a lot of them, and we're going to go through them really fast here. And if you're taking notes, please give yourself a break. I'm not going to go deeply into the core principles here, but the first one is customer satisfaction by early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Agile is called Agile because it gets there to the end quickly. You have software there after maybe 2 to 4 weeks, and it's not great software. But maybe 2 weeks after that, it's a little better, and 2 weeks after that, it's a little better. Welcome changing requirements, even in late development. Even as you get later and later into development, and you feel like the project is almost complete, you should always welcome new requirements, because you can just easily get that into the workflow, right? Deliver working software frequently, weeks rather than months. Because of the way Waterfall is structured, it takes months, years to plan out and develop software. Even if you try to speed up the Waterfall process to just take months, it still takes months. Agile is based on an idea of developing around the timeline of weeks. Close daily cooperation between business people and developers. And that's the people who do the paperwork, the people who do the contract negotiations, the people who don't know what C++ is, and the people that know what C++ is, but maybe the people that don't know how to write a paper, to write a contract. You want close daily cooperation between them. Projects are built around motivated individuals who should be trusted. And this is saying that the people up top, the people who are creating the business deal, should trust that the developers can create the project, who are willing to work on the project. And there's a lot of trust in Agile. There's a lot of trust in Scrum as well. And we'll talk about that a little more later. Face-to-face conversation is the best form of communication. And this is something that Scrum and Agile stand closely by. And if you are trying to apply Scrum and Agile in a space where you are not able to be face-to-face, whether that be on a video call or standing right in front of each other, Scrum and Agile will probably not work well for you. Working software is the primary measure of progress. At the end of each sprint, and we'll get to what sprints are, by the end of each sprint, as we call them, we always want working software. The goal is always to have something working to show the customer. And once again, we'll get to what that means when we get to Scrum. Sustainable development, able to maintain a constant pace. That is, we're not crunching. If something isn't able to get there, it's not done this sprint. It's for the next sprint, right? We're not trying to make everything fit in a timeline, a structured timeline that we have planned out months in advance. You'll see a lot of software releases, such as video games, really. Video games is a really common example, where they'll say months in advance, we plan on releasing this time next year. And the video game developers have no choice but to getting crunched, try to get the product there by that date. And if it's not there by that date, that's what they're releasing. And that's not what Agile is. That's what Waterfall is. If in Scrum things aren't working out as according to requirements, timelines get pushed back because Scrum and Agile, they're meant to be flexible. And flexibility is a big key feature in Agile. Continuous attention to technical excellence and good design. And this is kind of a nothing burger. It's we pay attention to good code and good design. Simplicity. The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. That is, if we can offload work that doesn't need to be done, then we don't need to do it. Documentation, quite often, is work that doesn't need to be done, in that you don't need all the requirements documents and you don't need all of this fancy system requirements and systems analysis and user preliminary research. While that's good to have, sometimes that's not what you need. And if you can try not to do that where you don't need it, then you're not wasting time working on something that you don't need to. And I might not be able to get this idea across very well, but I think if you really take the time to think about how you can cut out work that you don't need to be doing, you might find yourself moving a lot faster through things, right? Easier said than done, of course. And I believe the last one here, best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. That is, the developers, putting the power in the developers. If the developers have the power to organize what works best for them, they can probably work with what's best for them and create the most efficient product. Oh, and there's the last one actually. Regularly, the team reflects on how to become more effective and adjusts accordingly. Once again, the power is in the development team to reflect on self and to know what's best for itself. But also, we're trusting development teams to look at what they're doing and go, maybe what we're doing there is not so great. So, what does this actually mean, right? How do we put it into an actual tangible kind of experience? And that is with iterative development. Traditional software development is delivered in products. Oh yeah, traditionally, sorry, totally off my rockers there. Traditional software development is usually released in wholes and monoliths. But we've changed a lot, and the way that we use software has changed a lot. And so maybe we need small features now and then and again. You don't get a brand new Google Chrome every once in a while. You get features added to your Google Chrome once every month or so, and you kind of hate it and you wish Google didn't do it. But sometimes they make a good feature, right? But that kind of thing has changed a lot, right? Internet Explorer used to release in Internet Explorer 1, 2, and 3, and that's not what we're looking for now. Development can be broken up from phases to continuous iterative development cycles. Think of an assembly line, right? Rather than having the software as a product be passed from team to team to team until it releases, multiple teams can be working on different parts and they move along the line. So for example, the analysis team passes some documentation along to the development team, and the development team begins developing, and while that's happening, some more research is happening and the code is being reviewed now and tested, and the development team can start working, right? And I'll show this on a diagram in a second. Agile encourages iterative development with smaller changes between each iteration, but leaving more room to explore each iteration more before widespread release, because now we're not focusing on big monoliths that have to fit in a scheduled timescale. Instead, we're looking at parts that continue to come in, and we continue to look at them. And because we're allowed to put this focus towards just research or just testing or just development, iteratively over and over again, we're able to play with it a lot more. So uh, here's the actual diagram of the difference between waterfall and agile, right? Um, Say you are creating a mobile app, right? You get your research, your planning, your development, you begin testing it, you deploy it, and you just keep security updates on it. And if you want to make a big new update to it, you need to start research again, and planning and development and testing and deployment maintenance. Agile is based on the idea of, well, we start research here, and then we move on to planning, and we move on to developing. And while that's happening, research is happening here, and planning is happening there, and development is happening. Oh, and the development is moved on to testing. And we still have some things that are planned, so we start developing, and we move that on to testing. And those things have already moved on out of testing, and we're researching on them already, and we're already developing some more things that we have planned, and we're already testing some things that we have developed, and so on and so forth. It's iterative. It goes in a circle. It's fast. Face-to-face communication is also a core principle with Agile. As the sixth principle said, as you remember, the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. In more traditional techniques, information is often shared between the customer and developer by third parties, right? By contract negotiators, by uh, big head executives. The developer doesn't talk to the customer, and the customer doesn't talk to the developer. But Agile demands that there be a dedicated person between them who understands both the customer and understands both the developer and talks to them 24/7? Not quite. But whenever they have a question, they'll go directly to the customer representative, and they'll be able to answer questions from the customer point of view and vice versa. Information should be shared frequently between each developer as well as between the customer and development teams, right? Communication should flow freely, nicely between the developers as part of the team, and also between the customer and the development teams, because that's where we need the most communication. And so feedback loops, say I create something and I want to know what the customer thinks. I can get that back and forth a lot faster than by releasing the entire piece of software and finding out and coming back, right? Direct collaboration becomes easier when everyone is in on the loop. If you're communicating only once a month, the communication isn't great. But if you're communicating every day as you need necessary, it's a lot easier to understand what's happening and what needs to be done and what's wanted and so on and so forth. And part of this face-to-face communication is the information radiator, as Wikipedia calls it. I don't actually know what it's called in the Agile methodology. I was actually not able to find it personally, but I also didn't look very deep, and I'm sure it's out there. The information radiator is like a screen or a whiteboard or even just a bunch of sticky notes on a wall that the developers can walk by and just see where we are with progress. And by knowing where we are with progress or just being able to see the radiator, and it's called the information radiator because it just kind of radiates information ambiently. By having this, we can have an idea of where we need to focus more time, where we need to focus more energy, where maybe some things are getting stuck and need more help, right? But importantly, Agile is a philosophy, it's a mindset. It's not a methodology and it's not a way we do things. There are many methodologies and practices that apply Agile, and one of the most popular is Scrum, and we'll be talking about Scrum. But once again, Agile is words, it's an idea. In application, uh, many groups find that Agile, as it is, doesn't exactly fit the workflow, and that Agile is actually too strict itself. Because if you have to follow all of these words, then there's only a few select cases where Agile can apply. Uh, getting too far into the agile mindset is also dangerous. You can't cut out all of the work. You still need to document and you still need to plan. And some people do get stuck really hard into the agile mindset and say, well, we don't need to do any of that because it's a waste of time. It's not always a waste of time. We should pull ideas from agile, not use it as a law. We should be adaptive to change and communicate with both our teams and our customers. And if you want to learn more about agile, there are some resources right there. I'll also include those in the description of the video. Um, that is the Agile Alliance. They are responsible for currently handling the Agile project. The Wikipedia page, of course, which is very thorough, um, and the Atlassian Agile page. And Atlassian, a little less known source, they're a corporation who works closely in Git spaces, in Agile and Scrum spaces, and they release a good amount of articles. And some of those articles are also advertisement for Atlassian products, which help support Scrum and Agile workflows. But they're also pretty good articles by themselves. So now let's return to an earlier question. What is Scrum now? Well, as I mentioned before, Scrum is based on the Agile framework. Um, it's iterative development. Scrum helps teams deliver product in parts rather than in wholes, right? You're not delivering monoliths at a time, you're delivering updates, new features at a time. Agile was about philosophy, and Scrum is about applying those concepts. And Scrum might not work for all teams either. Um, Most importantly, if you are a team that has a lot of varying schedules, or if you're geographically distant to each other, Scrum is still very reliant on this idea of face to face communication. And while video calls are still a great substitute, they don't always work. Now, Scrum is not Agile. These two are not interchangeable. Agile is a mindset, it's a philosophy, remember? And Scrum is a development framework that utilizes Agile. Scrum also does not adhere to every aspect of Agile. And this is maybe a more common criticism of Scrum, that it's just not really following Agile and actually kind of goes directly against Agile in some ways. But Scrum is iteration via sprints, right? Um, Scrum has a bit of rigid rules. It's not quite as flexible, but there are other frameworks and there are other methodologies and practices which I'm sure are far more flexible. There's Scrum derivations that are less like Scrum and a little bit more agile, and there's also ones that are just not really like Scrum. Um, in any case, Scrum relies heavily on highly communicative and iterative development processes that Agile outlines. Development life cycles are broken into periods of time no longer than a month, and these are called sprints. Developers and stakeholders meet regularly across these sprints, and regular meetings encourage developers to be flexible and to expect requirements to change, often, frequently, from sprint to sprint. So, what makes up a Scrum team? There's three major roles. There is one product owner, one Scrum Master, and everyone else, right? The product owner represents the stakeholders and customers of the product, right? They're the customer representative. They meet with the customer and they say, here's our product. Here's what we have so far. And then they also hear back from the customer, this is what we want, this is what needs to be changed. And then they come back to the Scrum team and they say, hey guys, this is what needs to change. The Scrum Master is the person that is on the team that, you know, goes, hey, sorry guys, we're not following Scrum here. We actually need to do this in order to be a little closer to Scrum. The Scrum Master is the nerd, right? They're knowledgeable about Scrum and they coach other people on how to follow Scrum. They facilitate the Scrum meetings and they say, hey, this meeting is running a little long, maybe we need to break it up, right? And the developers are developers. Quite often, Scrum Masters are also developers. They just also happen to also be Scrum Masters. And here's the key point. Scrum is about developers, not administrators, not bigwigs. Um, there is no Scrum without putting power into the hands of developers. So let's talk about the sprint. A sprint, once again, is at least 1 week and is up to 1 month. 2 weeks is the most common length for sprints. So sprints are every 2 weeks, or they start every 2 weeks and end every 2 weeks. There are longer sprints, but that's not recommended by the Scrum manifesto. And similarly, you can have shorter sprints, but at that point, it's a little difficult to be doing Scrum. Sprints begin with a sprint planning meeting. That's we'll actually talk about each of these meetings in a little bit. Um, but there's a sprint planning meeting where you decide the goal of the sprint. Once that sprint ends, you hold two meetings: the sprint review and sprint retrospective. Once again, we'll talk about those are. Um, at some point along the line, maybe towards the start, towards the middle, towards the end, it depends on the team. You do some backlog refinement, and we'll talk about what the backlog is as well. Uh, and this is just held to refine backlog tasks for future sprints. The goal of the sprint is to create a working product each sprint and share with the stakeholders for iterative feedback and release. Not every single product of a sprint is released. Um, Sometimes you create something that just isn't ready to deploy, or maybe there's just not enough change to justify putting resources in to deploy it. Um, and this is all the meetings in the sprint. Like I said, we're going to cover these now. There are really these 5 meetings. The backlog grooming. And like I said, we'll talk about backlogs in a second. Maybe I really should have put that before these slides, but the backlog grouping, you get the entire team to attend. That's the product owner, the scrum master, the development team. You spend up to a day doing it. You go through the backlog tasks, you revise them, you prioritize which ones are more important, and you also do the completion criteria. And you say, this is what needs to get done for this task to be completed. At this time, you're not claiming the tasks for yourself. Um, you're just kind of working on making sure that they make sense. Sprint planning is the meeting that kicks off the sprint. That's restrictively only up to 1 hour. And sometimes and quite often it'll run over, but I've also seen it quite often run shorter. It really depends on the size of the team. You get all your development team members to attend. The scrum master's there. The product owner does not necessarily need to be there. The goal of the upcoming sprint is defined, and that is how many tasks we're going to complete, um, what we're looking for in that end product ourselves, what we're looking to do, not what they're looking for us to do, what we're looking to do. And at this point, they split up some of the tasks that they're looking to complete the sprint amongst developers, right? Daily Scrum, or it's also called stand up. All of the development team members attend. No need for product owners to be there. Scrum masters are there. It's up to 15 minutes, and that's a strict 15 minutes. If your stand up is beginning to last more than 15 minutes, or people are talking too long, you kind of break it up and then you say, hey, we can talk about this after the meeting. We can have a smaller meeting. Let's just focus on the stand up. And the stand up is just a little meeting where everyone says, hey, this is what I did, and I'm not having any issues, or hey, this is what I've been doing, and I am having some issues. But this is not the time to talk about what the issues are, and this is not the time to talk about what the solutions to those issues are. Those are for after the stand up. The Scrum Master really has to keep a clamp down on this one and make sure that everyone is staying on track. The sprint review. That's all the important people: the stakeholders, the customer, the product owner, and the Scrum Master. There's not really a time limit to this one, really. Oh, excuse me. The finished product from the previous sprint is demonstrated to the stakeholders at this point. Once again, there's not really a time limit on this. I would say like 2 to 3 hours, but it's really about how long it takes to demonstrate and how much time the customer is willing to put aside. Um, at this point, you take the feedback and you record it, and then you bring it to the retrospective, where the product owner, Scrum Master, and development team are there. You don't get the stakeholders or the customers there. You spend up to a day, but I think it's usually about 2 to 3 hours is recommended. You analyze what went well in the previous sprint, what didn't go well in the previous sprint, what the feedback was, what they need to work on, and yeah, that's it on that front. That Now we get to the backlog. Like I said, this probably should have come a few slides earlier, as we've talked about the backlog a lot now. The product backlog, and these are quotes stolen directly from Wikipedia. The product backlog is a breakdown of work to be done and contains an ordered list of product requirements that the team maintains for a product. The product owner maintains and prioritizes the product backlog items based on considerations. Uh, and that's to say, there's a product backlog, which is everything you need to complete for. Here, let me get a laser pointer up. The product backlog, which is everything that you need to complete in order to consider the product complete as a whole. Um, and the product owner will fill this out based on customer feedback and requirements. And then they'll prioritize by themselves, or maybe during backlog grooming. And then there's sprint backlog, which is just the backlog for the current sprint. So as we're getting ready to queue up products or product tasks for the current sprint, we put them into sprint backlog, and as we begin the sprint, we slowly move them into in progress when we're working on them, review, and complete. These are just some recommended categories. Really, the only ones that they outline, for Scrum are these two right here. These other ones are just whatever the development team feels like is most appropriate and works best for them. It's also important to note when the sprint backlog is being filled out, it's not about what the customer necessarily would like to see be completed by who. The developers say, I think I can complete, for example, create a basic UI. I believe that I can complete encrypted data. I don't think that we can get security testing done this sprint, right? That it's about the developers here, and it's not so much about what would be ideal to executives, because developers understand what is what we want out of timeline. So the pros and cons, right? Scrum, it puts powers into the hands of developers, but this power is only really useful if the developers understand how to use it. Um, if you can use it effectively, you get lots of communication and peer collaboration. You get peer programming, lots of chances to say in your stand-up, "Hey, I'm having some trouble." Um, when done correctly, it really increases the efficiency and team collaboration. It creates strong bonds and lots of trust, and you become good friends. But if you don't have a good understanding of Scrum, it can tear apart teams. If you are letting like a supervisor take care of handling the Scrum meetings, or an accountant, right? Someone who's not really understanding how the development workflow goes. Or if you don't have trust in each other to complete the tasks, you can be going into sprint meetings and saying, hey, I don't think Jeff will be able to complete that task. I'll take it. I don't think he should take it. And Scrum, the backlog, is really about each developer saying, I can take that, not I don't think someone else should take that. It's about yourself, right? And so really there's a lot of trust that comes to Scrum. Scrum works really great for incremental development life cycles, and it really just doesn't work for products that need to be released in a waterfall style way. Maybe you are just making a piece of software that is just developed once and it just stays that way, and you really do know all the requirements right at the start. If that's what you have and what you need, waterfall is what's best for you. But Scrum does have pros and cons. A lot of pros for working in iterations and going back and forth with feedback. If you want more Scrum resources, check out scrum.org, which is the official Scrum website, the Wikipedia page, or another Atlassian page, right? Once again, those will be all in the description. So, as we encroach here on 40 minutes of me rambling and sniffling and kind of stumbling my way through a PowerPoint, I'm going to cut this video short. And in the next video, we'll move on to Git, how we use it, and how to set up Git for Agile and Scrum.